Okay, I'm going to read the beginning of a short story I'm working on called The Paradoxical Theory of Change. Those who saw his angry alcoholic dad said it changed their life. And after he role-played the surgeon in Deathbed Veteran and convinced the soldier to donate the entire trough of his internal organs over and above the limbs he'd already lost in the war, everyone at the Institute threw out the script. No one, not even the cognitives, was going to touch it after that performance. So why then was Mick Epley sitting alone in the cafeteria of the Institute? I watched a girl hover with her tray and then chicken out. I was across the room with Nancy and Sid. At the time, I was Nancy's best friend on account of never having dated Sidney. They had made it to the finals. It was Sunday afternoon, and in about a half an hour, we'd all troop into the auditorium to watch them compete against two other teams. Let's face it, we were all feeling a bit down. It had done nothing but rain for 4 days. Nancy and Sid were tense and irritable, feeling the pressure. I was sitting with them because I was supposed to be helping them, rehearse. They were going to role-play that scene about the woman who needs her husband to describe the birth of her child. She had a C-section and doesn't believe the baby is hers. When Sid finished his vocalizations, he said he was ready. Responding to our notes, he said he would try and be more desperate. Okay, here goes. Suddenly, the big overhead light snapped on, and I was blinded. It was awful, but it was also kind of wonderful. I couldn't believe how many instruments the nurses were handing to Dr. Brady. By then, he was wearing the face shield. You probably couldn't see any of this because by then they'd erected the tent. Wait a minute, Nancy said. Tent? What, like with Coleman lanterns? Sid explained that he didn't know all the exact medical terminology. You don't know the medical terminology for curtain? It was unfair, but all I was thinking was how great the scene would be with me and Mick. It was then I noticed the clouds above the courtyard had scattered, and that behind Mick's head, the sunlight, suddenly plentiful, was filtering through the trees, building little Japanese cities on the atrium glass. Time began to dilate. In that moment, was I freaked out? Sure. Was I frightened and lonely, fragile and confused? Absolutely. But here was the universe reaching out to me saying, Lisa, it's time for personal growth. Nancy's voice cut through my reverie. Hey, what are you doing, Lisa? She turned around to follow my gaze. No, not Mick Epley. Bad idea. Lisa, sit back down right now. But it was too late. I was already in the tractor being pulled towards Mick's table. I was floating like I was traveling towards the rapture, even while Monkey Mind was warning me that this would end in a walk of shame. I stopped a few feet away. He was eating his Jell-O with these little mincing bites, favoring only the forward teeth and avoiding the molars, like somebody who has afraid of commitment. He looked up and said, Hey, how you doing? Such a freighted question. Sometimes even a trap. You don't want to know, I said, but you're going to tell me anyways. We began to relax. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, he said, but didn't I see you play the woman who finds out her boyfriend is gay? I wish, I said. I'm Lisa Ulbrich. I gave him my bravest smile. I have to admit I was a little crushed that he didn't remember me from the shame management breakout session. But then I was seated across from him. I don't know why all of us found him so intimidating. Up close, he was plain looking. His eyes were bruised and pouchy, and his skin was pale, like the color of a gyoza. There wasn't any light coming out of his face, and really, when you came right down to it, his affect was like wafer thin. Still, I was a little nervous, and doing this thing I do when I'm anxious, which is to focus on individual body parts. I drew a little box with my vision and only allowed his mouth, cheeks, and jaw in the box, and a little bit of his ear. The earlobe, really. Not even any nose. You can add body parts when you're more relaxed. Then, as I focused deeply on the spatial rectangle, I saw movement. Just a tiny downturn at the corners of his mouth, a little ripple mid-cheek, and then very slowly the lips, which were cracked and dry, parted, and I could see his teeth, which weren't all that white, but still I realized that because I was there, he was smiling, and it was a kind of a miracle, like reaching puberty. Girls will know what I'm talking about. One day you go to school and your best friend shows up, who only yesterday had sweaty feet and big knobby clown nose red knees, but now overnight is utterly transformed. She is glowing with beauty and sexual power, and everything she does or touches or talks about has this unspoken part that says, now I have the power to make boys walk into lampposts. And you know what? I'm going to use it. I kept gravitating towards these girls, expecting that because of proximity, it could happen to me, which is kind of dumb, like thinking you'll be rich because you live next to a bank. And even though it would never happen to me, I believe in these moments, and I knew what I was going to do. I formulated my plan. I was going to pimp his affect. So, I said, I gotta ask, so, like, what's the deal? I haven't in months, he said. Yeah, and everybody's like, when's Mick gonna do a scene? I want to, but doesn't this ever feel, self-indulgent? Reenacting stuff you screwed up, hoping for a better outcome? Oh, wow, I said. I'm just the opposite. I'm like the black hole of self-obsession. Didn't you ever do those sentence completion exercises? My emotional problems keep me ... I said company. And as far as the do-overs, I'm like, let's start in the birth canal. Yeah, Mick said, but would you want the same people? So I take it you don't buy into the whole worst enemy, best teacher concept? I'm talking about family, he said. Who isn't? My mother was the one who got me into role-playing, though she doesn't know it. My shrink told me to repeat something, only this time using my mother's voice. I couldn't shake it for 3 days. Lisa, your sister's a junkie, and she doesn't dress like a farm animal. You think that's bad. My parents were hippies. Mine thought it would be patronizing to treat me like a child. She felt compelled to tell me stuff I didn't want to know, like she thought of having an abortion. Ask me, you're lucky. After I was born, my parents didn't have sex, at least with each other. Mine did, but in front of me. It's all love, they'd say, and wave at me. Thank God I can't remember, but that didn't stop her from telling me about it. So I guess it's avoidant versus compulsive, I said. You can't have both, he agreed. I was getting turned on. The way we were flirting, it was like strip poker, only we were shedding defenses. I knew I needed to get him to do a scene with me. This guy was a virtuoso. If he had to be manipulated into an alpha state to feel good about himself, that was the ticket price. Plus, if I've learned anything during my years at the Institute, it's that you have to be careful not to front-load the self-disclosures. For instance, it was way too early to tell him that Rikers was sending my letters back, or that my primary therapist dumped me to join Shrinks Without Borders, where he was posted to Vienna. And it would be a long, long time before I told him about my sister and the scenes that were always repeating. The only drag was that he seemed more available than I expected. That's dangerous for me. Before my last boyfriend was sentenced, he told me that the only time I loved him was when we were breaking up. At first, Mick was resistant, but I wore him down. Finally, we could find something we agreed upon. No scripts, where we role-played our parents. That was the deal. That freed us up to start throwing out ideas willy-nilly. I said, what about, I'm not pulling the plug, he needs to suffer. Or, I hate your friends. He suggested, I want that kidney back. Or, that's more than a green card. The 5-minute bell rang. Pretending that I didn't really care, acting real casual, I said, hey, want to do a breakout scene? Sweet, he said, cut to the chase. By the time I got back to Nancy and Sid, I was feeling better about myself than any time since my confirmation. As I sat down, Sid was saying, what if you made her the kind of woman who doesn't really believe in anything unless it's gruesome and depressing? What if you shut the fuck up, Nancy said. He deadpanned, at least the anger isn't having trouble getting out. Thank you.